Large versus small development using simple statistics to compare. So for this simple statistics, I'll be using something called kurtosis. So kurtosis is a measure of the degree of outliers in the distribution. So a higher kurtosis will imply a higher volatility where you will notice more extreme price movements. So if I will use this chart to represent, a baseline is always a normal distribution, which is actually the red line curve right here. A more extreme, or what you call higher kurtosis price movement, will be this green line here. It has a flatter mean, flatter concentration around the mean, and a fatter tail at the extreme ends. This will actually imply more extreme price movement on either side. As a representation of small development, I've chosen around 10 boutique condos. Boutique condos are developments of less than 100 units. And this is compared to our large developments, which I term it as any development that is above 500 units for the period from April 2020 to April 2025. For large developments, kurtosis is generally near zero or slightly negative. These closely represent normal distribution and have shorter tails. What this means is that price distributions are more stable and extreme price movements are less likely to occur. It can be inferred that prices of last sold are easily taken as a reference point for the next sell price, and large deviations are less likely to occur. So if you notice for Sterling residences, as a sample, the development size is about 1,259, total levels 40. So you'll notice that in terms of the comparison to the mean, which is my trend line, are actually quite scattered at this point. And the reason being is that Sterling residence is very huge development. There are multiple variables, including story level, mix, layout mix, etc., that makes a difference. So if I were to just take one variable into and focus on it, which is levels from maybe 31 to 35, notice that the dotted plots are actually much closer to the trend line as compared to what you see above if I were not taking variables. And Sterling residence is a very good example of something that has very limited, what I call very small deviations or extreme movements from the mean. For smaller developments, the kurtosis is generally greater than zero and have a higher tendency to deviate from normal distribution. What this means is that the distribution is much more fat-tailed and sees more extreme price movement. If I were to laser focus on one of the developments under the boutique condominium category, you can take a look at the width. It's a development size of 71 units, total levels of 8. And if you take a note of the scatter plot, you'll notice that the price points are actually quite deviated away from the trend line. And this can actually imply that extreme price movements are actually more evident in the smaller developments. So what does this all mean for you? If you are a buyer of a large development bearing all other attributes of the property, I will put more weight to actually last sold price as a reference point. If you are a buyer for a smaller development, I will put actually less weight to the last sell price and more research and comparison determine fair value for this property. Does it mean that a larger development will have more capital growth potential than a smaller development? Not necessarily so. What this means is that a smaller development would require more work to derive its fair value and more effort in terms of negotiation between the buyer as well as the seller. If you're unsure about your property's investment potential or just want a second opinion, please feel free to reach out. Join me in All In with Alan.